Okay, here we go.
Live.
Um, we are here live, ladies and gentlemen. We should be able to see if anybody hops on live. I think last week we had a couple of people show up, but yeah, we're live. We're here. It's Friday. And this is going to be a great interview. So, thank you everybody who is able to make it live and come and check out this interview from one of my really good friends that like we met from working together in my coaching program, and we always have a great time talking, all the laughter and all the jokes every time. But yeah, this is season 2 of Therapy Entrepreneurs DPT to CEO, etc. title podcast, where we bring people on who are either practice owners or they're therapists who have gone into business for themselves, and we're here to get all of the wisdom from Mr. Tyler Burke today. So thank you, Tyler, so much for being here.
Yeah, you bet, Morgan. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah.
And yeah, for everybody watching, it is kind of lucky that we're actually streaming because we could have just talked for about an hour and a half probably before even remembering to hit live. So it was good.
That'd be so funny. Oh my gosh. Maybe we should start our own podcast where we just talk the whole time. Like no topic. Just talking. We'll do that later. We'll just
Okay.
stick a pin in that for right now.
You've got my email.
Got my email. Yes. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and dive in, learn a bunch more about Tyler and everything that he's been doing. And we're also going to touch on a couple of really important concepts, I suppose, when it comes to entrepreneurship, but also kind of just like living your life as a human
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
some things that Tyler's learned, and we'll go from there. So, Tyler, if you don't mind sharing with us everything about you, what's led you to this point?
Um, well, I was born in 1987,
Perfect.
and we'll skip ahead a little bit.
It
Um,
sounds like
I
somebody's past medical history.
right, yeah, we're doing a subjective too. Yeah, so I decided I wanted to go into PT school. And I had always kind of been interested in entrepreneurship, being a business owner. Didn't really know how that was going to happen. So if we fast forward a bit, I am in PT school and finish up, and I'm thinking, okay, well, a really cool way to, I could still own a business and I can be a PT. I can start my own practice. This would work, right? And then after PT school, like any of you that maybe went to PT school can attest to, you go through 7 years of school and you had about a week of business education, and it's like a project, and they give you like $100,000 and build out this practice, right? And then you get out in the real life and you're like, well, where do I get $100,000? Like, where do I go from here? And
Yeah.
so I was always fascinated with how do I start a clinic? How can I do this? I have too many student loans already. I don't want to take out a business loan. That just didn't interest me at all. And so a couple years went by. I was practicing as a travel therapist and getting a lot of experience in different settings. And then I started kind of that interest in being a clinic owner just kind of grew in me a little bit more. And I was like, okay, I think I could do this. I've got some experience now. And so I started watching webinars and reading books and business books along with PT stuff. I got started following some of the bigger names that we hear about all the time in cash PT. And I didn't even know that existed. How can we do things out of network? Because at the time that was really interesting to me, because I was really getting kind of, I don't know if I was burnt out, but I was getting a little jaded, I guess, with an insurance company saying, okay, with this patient, you can provide these treatments and you can only see them 6 times, when everything inside of me is saying that treatment's not going to work for this person. And
Yeah.
I don't know that we can get everything done in 6 treatments, and so the cash PT or out of network practice, really, that model really interested me because it allowed me to practice the best way I knew how to and provide the highest quality that I could provide, and not the highest quality that the patient's insurance would allow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it allowed a lot more freedom for me, and in turn kind of would, allow me to get people better faster. And that's what I want to do, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm learning all about this cash model, and I'm still like, well, where am I going to get the money to open a clinic? I have no idea how I'm going to do this. And I was fortunate enough a couple years ago to CSM. And I don't know if you want to call it divine intervention or fate or whatever it might be. I was there to learn about a whole bunch of other things, but I saw this one class listed and I was like, that sounds really interesting. I should go check that out. And it was about telehealth and physical therapy. And this is pre-COVID. This is just a couple months before COVID really hit the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so that idea was just so foreign to me as a practitioner. So I can imagine that it's probably kind of an odd, it's unusual. It's something new for a lot of my clients too.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I go in and I take this class, and I thought it was fascinating. It was taught really well, and I was like, all right, maybe I'll look into this a little bit more. And so I got some contact information, and I'm moving forward. I'm reading books, business books. I just keep coming back to this idea of this telehealth practice. I was like, that's something I could feasibly do. I don't have to go, eyebrows deep in debt to open up a clinic.
Yeah.
And it's a way that I can still help people and not pass along that rent, all the overhead that you have in a clinic to my patients. And so I can keep the cost of physical therapy a little lower, being an out-of-network practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so 2020, September 2020, I decided I was going to do that. I thought I had everything down. I said, this is the type of client I like. I have my avatar. I've got X, Y, and Z set up. I already went through 2 different telehealth and EMR systems, found what I liked. And I get going and I'm like, I'm just not getting any traction. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not really sure what to do. And came across Morgan, and we got to talking, we hit it off, and we started working together. And I'll never forget it. Everybody talks about, this is that buzzword, right? That pivot that everybody talks about during COVID, or business owners. And we're talking, it's not feeling whole yet. Like there's just not that niche really. It was pretty bland. And we're talking one day about outdoor stuff and hiking, kayaking, camping, X, Y, and Z. And Morgan's like, Tyler, that's your niche. And I was like, never would have occurred to me. And since then, there's really no outdoor PTs that I've been able to find in Idaho. And there's a ton for football, baseball, basketball, your general ortho clinics. But there's a ton of people in Idaho here that are, the weekend warriors. They're working 9 to 5 and they're getting out on the weekend and they're busy. And that's kind of my client because with telehealth, it takes a lot less time. You're not spending time driving to and from a clinic. You can do your therapy in an office or in a hotel room, wherever you might, traveling for work or something, wherever you might be. And so that's kind of the really quick fast forwarded version of where I am now. Yeah.
Yay. Good story. So unfortunately I can't see the name of this person, but they say people in Idaho don't like to do nature. That can't be right.
There's a few of us.
Yeah. just a select few. Well, cool. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I know that everybody's story is so different for, how they ended up here, like us, right? But there are a lot of similarities too, people who they just want something different, whether it's for themselves or for their patients, for a lot of us both. And so I think that, that story really resonates with a lot of people. And kind of going off of that too, I know one of the things that you wanted to talk about was, the inevitable failures that are going to come along. Especially when, like you said, you read everything, you listened to everything, you watched everything, you studied everything, all the things, but like didn't go the way that you thought it would go. So can you tell us a little bit more
Right.
about that?
Oh yeah, there's about 100 stories that I could tell,
Okay.
but
All right.
I mean, essentially, I'm a pretty by nature. I'm pretty risk averse. You know, I'm not one to take
Mm-hmm.
big gambles, very often at least. And so I really did my homework. I spent thousands of dollars on different classes and really tried to make it as risk free as possible, right?
Perfect.
And try to limit failures as much as possible. And this is something that I was telling you, Morgan, that it's kind of been on my mind and kind of on my heart a lot recently because I'm still going through these huge changes in my business that it's like, man, I can't get this right, you know. And it's like I've been doing this for a couple of years. Like, what's the deal?
Yeah.
And I think um, one thing that's really helped me is I'm also a very competitive person,
Hmm.
and I think when I started working with you, I said my goal is to beat all your other clients.
Yeah.
And so I don't like to fail because in my head it's always been failure is final. And
Mhm.
I'm really starting to learn and kind of grow in that failure is not final, right?
Right.
You just got to keep going. And
Hmm.
one thing that really irks me now especially is how whoever they are, they put these acronyms together, these success acronyms, right?
Uh-huh.
And the one for fail is first attempt in learning. I'm like, that does not apply to any entrepreneur I've ever met because it should be like the 400th or 500th attempt in learning because you fail constantly. Um,
Hmm.
Now with that, there's obviously wins. You know, it's not all losing,
Yeah,
but
it's not all failure.
there's some really big wins with, especially with my clients, and that's really why I do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of from a business aspect, having really no knowledge going into it, being able to be okay with failure and
Yeah.
then grow from that and change your tactics.
Hmm.
Um, so that's something that I'm going through right now, and I'm sure that probably resonates with someone else that owns a business.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, Jeff Denning trolling Tyler. Great to see you guys on here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Jeff's the other person who lives in Idaho.
Jeff and I actually we're buddies. We work together at another place where we both own businesses on the side and work together at another place. So
Cool. Awesome. It's like that's something I love too. Like getting into this is like you meet so many people,
yes.
and so many friends. And then we also have a question from somebody else for Tyler. What were some of your unexpected failures?
Um, well, earlier on, I don't, it was just luck or what, but I started getting on a hot streak right away. Within a couple weeks of opening my business, I had a referral, then that person referred someone to me, and then another person referred someone to me. And so things just really started to snowball really well. And then summertime hit and nobody wanted to do PT anymore. And things dropped off really quickly. And
Mhm.
so trying to figure out why that, you know, why those people dropped off when it did, what can I do to not depend so much on word of mouth,
Mhm.
and just kind of growing from that. So that's one example of a million.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that is probably like more common than we think, like a lot of us here are still kind of like in the newer phases of things and like some people just like strike gold and immediately like all the patience and that's great, that's amazing, but then also sometimes uh it's a little bit overwhelming to the point where like you kind of forget that you need to be like setting up other systems and putting other things in place. So, like word of mouth is great. Like that's one of the best referral sources, because like other person, trusts their friend who has worked with you. And so it's like similar to having like testimonials and reviews. But you can't control it, like it's
Right.
a great referral source, but all you can do is like be a good PT and hope and pray, that
Right.
people talk about you.
Yeah.
And so like sometimes I guess like I just want to put out there too that like people who like feel like they're struggling maybe in the first few months of opening, finding anybody at all, it almost gives you like an opposite result of, like figuring out kind of that like outbound lead stuff, and then word of mouth comes in. But, like I said, everybody has different experiences, and, you end up learning a lot of the same lessons, whichever way that it goes. And then I think there was something else I was going to ask about. I guess like one thing that I'm kind of curious of is like, what made you kind of like pull the trigger? Like, what was like the catalyst of being like, okay, like I've read literally everything, like I need to start doing this?
Yeah. I there's probably a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Finally got to the point where I was like, all right, you've drug your feet long enough.
Yeah.
There was a reel I did about this, and I talked to a friend of mine who's really big into leadership, and he has a podcast, and he interviewed somebody that I have a lot of respect for.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the pieces of advice that was given in that podcast was, you just got to put a shot clock on it. If there's something you're thinking about doing, there's something you've got to do. Maybe that's, you want to run a marathon for the first time, you want to open a business, you want to quit your job,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be, those big life changes, there's always a reason not to. Right.
Yeah.
And so before I even heard that advice, I basically just did that to myself. I was like, all right, I just got to put a shot clock on it and do it. It was something I knew I always wanted to do. I would rather do it and fail at it than
Mm-hmm.
never having done it at all.
Yeah.
And the other piece of that maybe was a bit of a catalyst was, well, two things. One, I just kind of stumbled into that class at CSM.
Mm-hmm.
And weeks before CSM, we had our first son. And so it was kind of a combination of those things. And it's like, well, it's not going to get any easier when he's 3 or 4,
Yeah.
or, he's 12, we're taking him to soccer practice or something, so it was more of a, you just got to do it. And I think a few of those things kind of came to head, and finally I pulled the trigger, and
yeah, and here we are.
Here we are. Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I should have named the podcast Just Do It. Nike may or may not have gotten upset about that, but like that's,
maybe you can get them to sponsor you.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Okay, I need to call them. Like, but like that's just like what everybody says. Like whoever like comes on this live stream and in the podcast, everybody's advice is just do it. And just talking about that, I think like sometimes it's like okay to kind of like dip your toes in before you like fully get into things. But I hear a lot from people like, oh, I'll just wait until this. Like I'll be more comfortable when this happens. And, like if I just take more classes, like you said, or, let me get my first 10 patients first, and then like I'll do something.
Yeah.
And it like, I get it, but I think like my advice for people would be, maybe give yourself one of those things, like if you need to wait 30 more days to feel comfortable, like you said, a shot clock. If you need 30 days to get yourself together, okay. But I think it's kind of like a dangerous place to be if you find yourself always saying like, oh, it'll be better when this, it'll be better when that, because like that day will never come, like you said.
Right. It's like having a baby. It's like you're never going to be ready. You just
Yep.
Never going to be ready.
Never going to be ready.
And this is kind of like having having another child, I guess, is your business, right? You're growing it, and you're
and there are good times, bad times, terrifying, exciting. Like it's just, and like that's something that I always talk about too, that I really love about doing this, is that like life is never dull. Like you have so many other like opportunities, you learn so many things, and it's just like a lot, I guess like a higher quality thing than being trapped in an outpatient clinic from 8 to 6, 5 days a week.
Right.
So anyway, our opinions here in the
Yeah.
podcast. Everybody has different stories.
That's true. And
um,
for people
mhm.
that are kind of thinking about it, if I may, Morgan,
Yeah, yeah.
people that are kind of thinking about it, you can, you don't have to just quit your job and go all in. I know there are some people that will definitely say just do that.
Hmm.
That is not my style at all.
Yeah.
So you take, sometimes home health is a little more flexible, and so you can see
Yeah.
patients, if you're doing home health in your area, or take a part-time job, or um, a couple of PRN jobs, something, so you kind of have some security. You can still afford your mortgage or rent.
Hmm.
You can have insurance for your family if you need that. But then you can also kind of build your business up. But I think once you get to a certain point and you've got that social proof, things are working for your business, uh, that's another jumping off point where it's like, okay, like I gotta just go all in on this and
Yeah.
leave the security net behind,
Hmm.
and so you don't have to do that all at once, though, I don't think.
Yeah. No, I don't think so either. I like to see kind of the progression, and of course not everybody can do that, but going from like full-time to part-time to PRN to business only, and that would be great in an ideal world. But there's also, like I've heard stories from people that were kind of similar to my story, where like my full-time job was making me so incredibly miserable all the time that like
Yeah.
I had to leave, like just even like for my own health. And like unfortunately I think that happens to a lot of us,
Yeah.
where it's your full-time job is just so like physically, mentally, emotionally draining that like you're kind of giving like your entire life force to it, and like what's the point of that,
Right. Right.
that whole thing. So I think you bring up a really good point that like there are a lot of ways to get into starting your own business, and it doesn't have to be like all or nothing. Because like the other thing too is that like success looks different for everybody. And that's one thing that I like to remind others as well is like, maybe success is seeing one patient a week. Maybe it's seeing 40 patients a week in your own practice.
Right. Right.
I don't recommend that, but for some people that's where they want to be, and that's okay too. Um, and so like the other thing that you mentioned you had wanted to talk about was like flexibility, and like learning, like you wrote down, learning to bend and not break, and I guess maybe like be a little bit more open to change, and
Hmm.
change is not evil. So
Right.
tell us more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even think I mentioned that. So my business is Idaho Direct Physical Therapy.
Hmm.
I came up with that name long before I opened my proverbial doors. Um, and I thought that I wanted to be kind of once I figured out I wanted to do telehealth, I wanted to work with, lower complexity, low back pain. I wanted to be kind of an outpatient clinic, but telehealth. And I kind of thought
Hmm.
that's where things were. As I mentioned, we kind of niched that down a little bit. And I'm working with people that enjoy the outdoors, love hiking, kayaking, camping, biking, all that good stuff like I do.
Hmm.
And, a couple of years have gone by, and it's like, so I was sitting in my home, which is where I see patients out of my
Hmm.
office, and I legit had my website up for like a year and a half, 2 years, and I go to Google myself, and I'm literally sitting in my office, and I'm not showing up as a PT clinic near me. And so I was like, okay, I'm a pretty good PT, but obviously I'm not a web designer. I'm
Yeah.
not a branding expert. And so one of the things I had done earlier this year was join a business networking group, which if you haven't, I recommend you do it. Even if you don't get referrals, you just make great connections with other people. And one of the people I've made a connection with is one of those branding experts, and so we're working on a whole new rebrand, a new name, is going to have a whole new look and feel, and hopefully speak better to the clients that I want to work with.
Hmm.
Love working with everybody, but especially those weekend warrior, those outdoor adventure types. And so we're kind of changing everything up. We haven't released the name or anything yet, but that's an example of, I was set on that for, I don't know, a year or two before I even made a business. And I'm just not speaking to the right audience. And so, I'm talking to my friend that does the branding, and he said, what do you think about a name change? Would you be open to that? And it's like, yeah, maybe, it depends on the name. And so we worked through some things, and it's been a really great process. And I'm excited to launch that probably next month. So that's
Hey,
an
oh my
example
gosh.
of kind of bending, like things just didn't work out. They weren't working out. And how can we change things
Yeah.
without just folding it in and going home?
Yeah. And I really like that you brought that up, because I think, like, of course there's like a flexibility with your business, but also even with patient care, like another question that I get like asked a lot, or like fears that are brought up is, like, how do I treat this person if they're paying me cash? Which is not a dumb question. It's something that's foreign to a lot of us.
Yeah.
And it's similar to, it's the same that you would do in the clinic.
Yeah.
you know um and like, I just think that, like, being open to like seeing how, like, you already have some experience, but there is going to be like a little bit of a change. Treatment still the same, whether it's online, in person, you're still going to treat the person the same. But making some changes, I suppose, like in your mindset around that, and maybe like ways that you communicate, like those are going to change, and that's okay, because change is not always bad.
Right. Yeah. It's hard though, right? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
like I mentioned, it's kind of like your baby, right? You started this
Yeah.
business. I don't want to change it. It's perfect the way it is. Well, it's not putting food on your table, so maybe it's not, right? So
Yeah.
you got to make changes sometimes, and having that openness, which I didn't initially have, to, okay, maybe this isn't right, maybe, and taking that feedback from what your audience is telling you, or what they're not telling you, right? If you're not
Yeah.
hearing anything, then maybe it's time for a change.
Yeah.
And having that mentality that this is a learning process, whether you've done it for 2 weeks or you've done it for 20 years. I think that good businesses are constantly, they're changing. If you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. And so
Mm-hmm.
having that mentality that we're going to bend, but we're not going to break, we're not going to give up our values,
Sure.
things that are important to us. Like you mentioned, I patient care is the highest priority. And I think it is for most people that have a cash practice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so certain values I'm not willing to sacrifice on, but other things like a logo, yeah, even though if
Yeah.
you get used to it, you love it, like, no, maybe we should change it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think having that flexibility and that mindset helps a lot, because I didn't have that when I first started, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like, a couple of things. I think that sometimes the like fear around like changing something is, you know, like, you're fearing that people will judge you for whatever you're changing it to, or, what if it doesn't work, like, right away or whatever. And you just don't know. And also, like, if people are judging you, great, like, it doesn't affect you, and those aren't your
Probably didn't want to work
people.
with them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a huge note as well, that I just like to point out to like newer business owners, is just because somebody asks to see you does not mean you're obligated to see them,
Yeah, that's very
especially if
true.
you talk to them and it's weird and you just
Yeah.
don't get a good vibe. You don't have to work with somebody,
Yeah.
that's kind of nice as well.
I
Um,
also have found a couple
mhm,
people have found me that it just wasn't a good fit. And
yeah.
so I really try, if I can, to set them up with somebody that would be a better fit.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that just putting that goodwill out into the universe is always a good thing to do too. So, like you said, you don't have to work with them. You're like, what, this isn't gonna be a good fit. It's
Yeah.
better to do that up front than get 4 visits in. They bought a package. Now you got to figure out, am I gonna reimburse them? Like, how is
Yeah.
this all gonna work? It's much better just to have a conversation up front, decide whether or not you're going to work together well, and make sure it's a good fit for your skills too. Don't be
Mhm.
afraid to turn people away. Do it nicely, but
Yeah.
you know, but you can't take on everybody, and
Yeah.
you don't want to. When you
Right.
open your own practice, you're doing this out of network practice. You don't want to have to take everybody. There's certain people that you work better with, and some people you don't. So I think that's
Mhm.
really important to know going into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like pay attention to like your intuition, and even if you can't like pinpoint why they're not a good fit, if you feel weird, don't do it because
That's
it's
right.
not going to be a good
That's
experience.
very true. Yeah.
And the other thing that I wanted to point out that I like that you brought up with the story of doing the rebrand is, another way to be like flexible and like bend and not break is being okay with asking for help.
Yeah.
Even if you are a solo practitioner, solo business, whatever, you're not alone. And, Tyler, like, great at identifying your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And being
Yeah.
okay with asking for help with things that like you don't feel comfortable with, or you feel like somebody else could probably just do better. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and it doesn't make you like less than or like a worse business owner or something like that. um I don't know about you, Tyler, but I feel like a lot of my own feelings that I've had like that, a lot of them come from the freaking practicals that we did in school where you had to be perfect, like
Yeah.
know everything. Otherwise, like your life is over.
Right. I
um,
never put that together, but that could be.
I shouldn't joke about it, but I feel like I kind of have PTSD from that,
Oh, geez.
and just like worrying about like, oh my God, like what are they gonna think? Like is this exactly right?
Right.
All the
It's a
time.
high
And
pressure situation for sure.
yeah, like I still remember sitting in the hallway outside of one of our like lab rooms to go in for a practical, and my heart rate was like 120
Oh,
beats per
yeah.
minute,
Yeah.
just like waiting to go in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think like one of the best things that I've like learned in the last year is whenever something happens and you start feeling like some type of way, see if you can take a step out of it and learn to respond to it without like initially being like everything's ruined. you
Yes.
know
Yeah.
um
And it's
yeah.
also important. This is hard for me too. Is take that the suggestions, the constructive criticism um, as it is. It's intended to help you and not let yourself get defensive right away, because that's hard to do sometimes. Sometimes it's like, what? Nah.
Yeah.
And and it's important to kind of, maybe it's bad advice, but think it over at least, and usually people aren't trying to just criticize you just to criticize you,
Yeah.
despite how things look on Facebook sometimes.
Oh man. I like I have to give myself like rules to not I'm not allowed to scroll. If I go on
Yeah.
Facebook, it's for like a particular reason. Get
Yes.
in, get out.
Yeah.
And try not to hang out too much. But speaking of social media, I was hoping this wasn't in the like preparations for this interview, but you mentioned to me that you've had a lot of like success and a lot of enjoyment in creating reels on Instagram. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So Morgan knows this. I am not a social media guy. I am not one that thinks anybody really cares about what I have to say every day, or
I
sees my
do.
dinner plate every night. Yeah, right. Maybe Morgan. I've got one follower. Um, but I, the written. I was putting up blogs all the time, and I was kind of hitting. I just wasn't getting a lot of traction, I guess I should say, on Facebook, my business page, even putting on my personal page. Um, and I'm thankful for the people that were looking at it and reading it, but it wasn't a growing audience. It was pretty stagnant. And
Mhm,
so I finally decided, all right, I need to do something a little differently.
mhm.
I will try Instagram. I know, crazy, right? And so I did Instagram, and this is another nod to the networking group that I'm a part of. There's a realtor there that she does fantastic stuff on Instagram,
Mhm,
hilarious videos, really engaging stuff, and I couldn't figure out reels to save my life. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I knew that I needed to do video content because I don't want to sit there and read a bunch of stuff either. Honestly, you're going to watch a video before you're going to go to someone and website and read like 1,000-page or 1,000-word blog, right?
Yeah, definitely 1,000 pages.
Yeah, 1,000 pages. Yeah, I can't figure out why no one will read my blog. But anyways, so I started doing that. I worked with my friend, and she helped me out and started generating some reels. And what I found there was that if it was something that resonated with people, that you could get, several thousand people would see your reel, versus you put it on Facebook or post or something, and it's 5 or 6 people that see it, and that's fantastic. I'm great to have those 5 or 6 people, but you need to generate more of a viewership to grow your business and to get those leads. And so I started doing that way out of my comfort zone. That was when my friend told me, put a shot clock on it, just start doing it, be consistent. Consistency is something that's really important with getting that traction and getting people to learn about you, because majority of the time, like if I'm going to go do business with somebody, it's not necessarily that I think that, Allstate's better than State Farm or something, right? But if I know someone that works for State Farm, or I know someone that works for Allstate, I'm going to go work with them because I know them. We've at least developed a superficial relationship, right? We kind of know of each other, or I know of them.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to show a lot of your personality and show what you're interested in, and kind of try and connect with potential clients, because they're not going to get to know me by seeing my still frame picture and reading, a paragraph about something, right? But if I'm out hiking and we put together something, or do a tutorial about how to wear a backpack properly, or things that I look for in that type of thing. So I'm talking to the outdoor type, and then it's also something that's practical and something where my skills as a PT comes to play, and it all kind of blends together nicely. So that's something I've been working on. I'm not an expert, but it's certainly something that has gotten easier over time. If you're someone that doesn't like to be filmed or video themselves like myself, I promise it does get easier. It sucks for the first 25 times you do it, but
yeah. And I like what you brought up about people will want to work with you because they know you, and I think that's really, really key when it comes to running your own business, especially as one person. And being a private healthcare professional, people will work with you because they feel comfortable with you, because they feel like they know you, and therefore they trust you. And video content is it's so great, and it's only continuing to become more and more helpful, I suppose, with digital marketing. I like it because you can easily make it into, video, audio, written, with one go of things. So it's really efficient. And you can also learn from somebody's voice and body language if you like them. People really do get to know you, like you were saying, and you don't have to be perfect either. This podcast live stream that's happening right now.
Yeah.
Minimal preparation.
Very little. Yeah.
But that's okay, because Tyler and I have a great time just chit chatting back and forth, and you can get to know both of us through all of the bad jokes and everything. And I think that's really great. And I wanted to ask Tyler about it because you've just been putting out so much great content on Instagram, and I see it all the time, and I'm just go Tyler.
Thank you.
My little graduate.
Right. Yeah. Because to give a little background that other people don't know is when I started working with Morgan, she's like, what do you think about using your personal Facebook page for your business stuff? And I was like, boy, that doesn't seem like something I'm going to do. No. but if Morgan says to do it, I'll start doing that. And so
Mhm.
it's really been a pretty big change over the last couple of years of getting more comfortable with just putting myself out there, because that's scary too, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is I've learned that you might don't spend too much time on these videos. If someone's
Yeah.
gonna start doing them, don't spend too much time. I think the first like couple videos I did, oh my gosh, I stayed, I filmed probably 2 hours worth of footage and I didn't like anything, right? You know, just keep putting this stuff out and it's just miserable. The ones
Yeah.
that have done best, I filmed in like 3 minutes, like when I'm on a hike, or
Hmm.
one of them that did really well, actually talking about failure. It was, I was in the parking lot. My wife was, we both had the day off. It was right before we went to the gym, I think. And she ran my son into daycare real quick. And while she was taking him into daycare, I filmed that reel, and like 4,000 people watch it. So like
Yay.
like don't, if you're spending an hour on a reel or a video for anything, you are taking, just scrap it, go back to it later,
Yep.
the next day or
Hmm.
something.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I understand wanting to have like good production value, and that's all well and good, but a lot of the times like people just want, the story, the information, the suggestions or
Hmm.
advice that you have to share.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter necessarily like whether it's like a well-produced video. Um and like I do the same thing whenever like I've made those shorter videos. I spend maybe 10 minutes on it, maybe, including preparation, of course.
Right.
There's no pre-prep.
Yes.
um and then even like with this video, like I'm going to put this on YouTube, and all I do to it usually is download it, upload it into my editor. I have like a tool that takes out all the silences, and then export and put it up on YouTube.
Perfect.
But I love that advice, Tyler. That's super helpful. And I think it will definitely make a lot of people feel more comfortable, getting started with everything.
Yeah.
And I guess like you've mentioned networking, of course, Instagram. Do you have any other marketing advice for all the young Padawans here?
I think another thing that I've done, and I'm hoping to do more of it. There was some uncertainty this summer with some of my plans, but this year I started doing. Um, so I've been reaching out to other businesses that maybe we have a similar niche, but we're not competitive. So, for
Mhm.
example, one group of people that I've gotten to know over the last few months is a camping store, a local camping store, same exact niche, uh, but not competitive at all, right?
Mhm.
And so I was talking with them and we had a great conversation. We hit it off and they invited me to do a workshop. And so I did a workshop there, and we spoke, and we called it the Happy Camper Workshop, and we talked about camping with back pain and ergonomics when you're out in the backcountry, right? How are you going to lift the wood, when you're going to go start a campfire, and things like that to help keep you from hurting your back when you're camping. And so doing more workshops like that has been good to at least get my name out there, and just meet other people. I'm not going to say that I've gotten like super rich off of it, but
Yeah.
I've only done a couple of them, and that's something
Mhm.
that I want to start doing more of, because you kind of, we talked about developing that relationship on Instagram. You kind of give it steroids when you do it in person. You can sit there and
Mhm.
you can chat face to face with somebody for 10 minutes. And then, if they, 6 months later, they hurt their back, they're like, oh, I remember that Tyler guy. And,
Yeah.
hopefully, I can help him out. Right. And so
Mhm.
I think that is a scary, but beneficial thing to do. Um, and yeah, just try and meet as many people as you can, especially when you're a solo practitioner.
Mhm.
People, like we talked about, they want to do business with you. They don't want to they don't care about your business. They want they want to work with
Yeah.
you. And so if they don't know you, they're not gonna want to work with you. And so I think that's really important.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And like I think that's a really good example of like going to where your audience is and like participating in that community before saying I want patience from this group,
Right. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Um and like that's something that like like, okay, I am one of those people that says I do CrossFit. So like, I don't need any attitude about that. But like the same thing happened at both of the gyms that I have worked out at. Like I went into it with the intention of, I want to work out here, and just like get to know people in the classes. And it took maybe like 4 or 5 months or so of me like consistently going. And then at that time, like people just end up walking up to you, and saying like,
Yeah.
hey, like I have this pain. Can you help me? Because they've gotten to know you. And so like being in the camping community, investing that time into that workshop, like it wouldn't surprise me at all if, 6 months down the road, like you were saying, you have a return on that investment because you took the time to like really invest yourself into getting to know people.
Right. Yeah. And even if it doesn't from that one workshop, if you do a good enough job, then maybe that business will ask you to come back, come back in the fall. Let's do this again. Oh, we have this other project going on. Would you be interested in this? Or I know someone putting on this event. Is that something you'd be interested in being a part of? And so that's kind of led me to a lot of different other opportunities. And so it's most of being a business owner, I think, or at least I've found, and Morgan, you tell me if you find this incorrect, but I feel like a lot of this stuff you do marketing wise it's kind of indirect. Like it's not like directly going to someone, hey, come see me. It's more like you're doing all this other stuff and then other people learn about you and then they come to you. It's not something that's going to pay off in like this week. This is the long game. You want your business to go for a long time. You got to kind of play that long game and not just try and get patients through the door today, which is frustrating when you're starting off. Really frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it always kind of like breaks my heart a little bit when I talk to practice owners that say they've been open for months and months or even years and they haven't had like any traction at all. But then when like I ask what they do, to find patients, it's nothing. It's having a website and then just hoping that people call. And like, here's the thing. Nobody cares about you. That's like, the other thing to remember is just because like you put up a website, people don't care. Like you have to invest in relationships, like you were saying. And then they'll pay off down the road. So I think that that's also like a really cool way, Tyler, of like looking at marketing is it doesn't have to be so like difficult or like scary and like, oh, I have to sit down and do marketing today. A lot of the time it's what do I like to do and who do I want to work with? I'll go do that activity.
Yes.
And meet people that way.
Yeah. And I know you do this with CrossFit. I don't know if you look at it this way or not, but if we're going on a hike or something, I'm just kind of going on a business trip that I really want to go on, right? Because I'm getting so much content. I'm going to take pictures anyway when I'm on the trail, and might as well just record a couple of videos and figure out a way to put that together that somebody might be interested in it enough to to learn about me and like, oh, I'm going to follow this guy and see what else he has going on. So it's definitely a long game. I don't know the trick to getting 20 people through your door tomorrow. But if anybody out there does, let me know. But we're definitely playing more of a long game, making those relationships, and hopefully those things will start to pay off in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. I think my answer to 20 patients tomorrow would be to go out and go door to door to about 400 houses and just ask for a patient. Which is totally fine. So if you want to do that, go for it.
That's fair. I've not, I guess, been that ambitious. Yeah.
It is fairly time intensive.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'd have to get used to like nobody answering their doors. So
yeah.
So maybe don't go down that road. Anybody listening to this, that can be like your 50th idea of things to try.
Right. Yeah. Don't necessarily cross it off, but put it down towards the bottom for sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like, throughout this podcast, Tyler, you've given so much great advice and suggestions. So I feel like we've already kind of covered this, but what do you think like would be like 1 to 3 things, 1 or 2 things, like some takeaways that like a newer practice owner or somebody who's like thinking about doing this, like what are the key concepts you would want them to know?
You are going to fail multiple times. Don't let that keep you from moving forward. Keep your eye on the why. Why are you opening a practice?
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is really hone in on what are your values. What's really important? What is going to be the values of this business? Because the business is, while you may be the only person there running it, your business is separate. And so what are really important for the business? And then make sure you don't, I guess, break those, but be willing to, change other things, as long as it's not changing the heart of what your business is or what you want it to be. Don't be afraid to change everything else. I think
Mm-hmm.
being open to change and knowing that things are not going to work out no matter how prepared you are, as long as you continue to learn from that, grow from it. I know it sounds cheesy, but that's really what I've found to be true, is that, if I quit the first 1 or 2 times I failed, I wouldn't be sitting here on this podcast right now,
Yeah.
because it's going to happen. It's going to happen a lot.
Yeah.
So I think those are two of the biggest things that I've learned over
Mm-hmm.
through this process. And I guess the third would be get out there, meet other people, ask for help. You don't have to be perfect at everything. It took me a long time to swallow my pride after working for years on my website to be like, I kind of suck at this. And so like, find someone that doesn't suck at it, right? Pay someone to
Yeah.
do it, save some money and pay someone that will do it well. And that's just one example, but don't be afraid to ask for help. Reach out to other practitioners. I don't know if Jeff is still watching, but I ask Jeff stuff all the time. I'm like, hey, what are you doing for this?
Yeah.
And we're in the same market, and so he may completely be lying to me, but um, I think that building those connections, build relationships, don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's probably the third. That's kind of a big third, but I would say those would
Yeah.
probably be my top 3 that I've learned so far. And if you ask me in a year from now, it might be completely different.
Probably.
But that's part of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like with the change thing too, I was just thinking, maybe it could help somebody who's feeling like scared or nervous about like jumping in. Because I feel like people go into this and they want to like do one thing at a time and only do it one time, kind of like what you were saying. And I'll just do this and then I'll move on, move on, instead of like being open to the changes. So maybe like one thing to think about as well is like go into it expecting things to change.
Yes.
Because if you set your expectations like that, then when things do fail or change, it's like, oh, well, I planned for this. So,
right.
It'll work out just fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Jeff is definitely sabotaging Tyler. So I suppose I would watch out for that.
I always suspected. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, cool. So thank you, Tyler. But before we go, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
On Instagram, I'm at Idaho Direct PT. Same thing on Facebook at Idaho Direct PT. Or you can contact me on Facebook with my name, Tyler Burke. You can find me. Yeah, I think those are probably the best places to get in touch with me.
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all of the advice, wisdom, suggestions.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
This was a lot of fun. And everybody who is here watching, or if you're watching this on the replay, thank you so much for being here as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments and either myself or Tyler will get back to you. And keep a lookout for me and Tyler's new podcast called Talking to Each Other. later on. So, okay. All right. Well, I hope you have a good rest of your day, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.